Welcome back to the channel. It's time to get the retrospective crew back together. This time we're talking about DC Presents. And here with me, as always, is award-winning comic book editor, writer, Joe Corolla. How you doing, Joe?
I'm all right, Wes. How are you?
I am absolutely fantastic. We also have the man so cool, they call him the Breed, the voice of the voiceless, longtime comic book reader, lifelong comic book reader, and he ain't young, folks. Eric Breed, how you doing?
I'm good, as can be expected, apparently.
How's the hip?
Throbbing along nicely, sir.
So we're going to talk about DC Comics Presents number 17, Superman and Firestorm, The Ice Slaves of Killer Frost, delivered in January of 1980. Gerry Conway writing, José Luis Garciá-López illustrating. Breed, is José Luis Garciá-López the definitive DC Comics artist, like of all time?
Well, certainly of the Bronze Age, and anybody that's seen any promotional material, whether it's those metal signs that you can buy at half-price books or T-shirts, there's a very good chance that the artist is José Luis Garciá-López.
He's never really had a long run on something at DC. He's just sort of he's done a lot of fill-ins, a lot of things. I believe he did the style guide for the 80s as well. So yeah, that's part of why, like Breen was saying, you would see his stuff everywhere. And for a lot of people to this day, if they don't say Kurt Swan is the definitive Superman artist, they'll probably say it's José Luis Garciá-López in terms of just that iconic imagery of the character.
And the best thing I could say about him is, just like when you were reading Bob Haney stories in Brave and the Bold, when Neil Adams was the artist, they felt less Bob Haney-ish because his art was so good. Lopez took over Superman for a handful of issues in 1977, where it went from Swan, and then you had a handful of his, and they just felt better. His art just made the stories feel a little old, aimed a little older, just more like what we were getting at Marvel. And to me, that's a testament to how good he was and still is.
So obviously in January 1980, we were having a DC Comics that's kind of changing its stars, its vision of what comic books should be. Gerry Conway has come over. Obviously, he was a lifetime Marvel Comics fan. You always saw him in the the reader comments and stuff as far as old school Marvel Comics. K-Vid killed off Gwen Stacy, did some other big time works over at Marvel Comics. Comes over to DC. A lot of people know him from his Batman stuff, but this is pretty good work here, Joe.
Absolutely. I mean, way to gloss over the Spidey mobile, but it's no, but this is solid stuff. This is around with the great Gerry Conway takeover of DC, when he was like writing what seemed like every other superhero title at the time. And this book actually goes into, at the end, and we'll get to it then, like what other books Gerry might be working on. This came out still a little bit before Gerry's run on Batman, and we're fans of that. So yeah, Gerry really brought, along with people like Marv Wolfman, Len Wein, and a few others, that Marvel sensibility. Doug mentioned a little bit from now, that Marvel feel that really elevated DC Comics in like the late 70s up through the 80s.
Yeah, so this is absolutely fantastic. I love Firestorm. We haven't got to cover the character here on the channel yet. This is the old school Stein and Robbie version of Firestorm Breed. And when we open up, we don't actually see Firestorm. We see Killer Frost is at Star Labs. She's been frozen, and they mentioned that it actually happened in a previous issue where Firestorm was down where she got her powers, and he kind of froze her solid. And they want Superman to defrost her so they can actually do an autopsy, which is a little bit ridiculous, but absolutely hilarious. And a man comes storming into the door, and it's Professor Stein. Obviously, they don't know that he's a superhero. And he's saying, "You can't defrost her. What are you doing?" And they decide to do it anyway.
Yeah, well, at the time, he didn't know either, because the original setup was that he was unconscious when they formed. He has no knowledge of it until they merge. But he knows that Killer Frost thawing her out is going to lead to catastrophe. And, of course, he's dismissed as a crackpot and a drunk. And they say, time to go to Bellevue, pal. So they drag him off. Superman finishes the job he was there to do. What do you know? She instantly murders everybody else in the lab and takes over Superman with her powers.
That was a little strange, Joe, because, obviously she freezes the guys. That kind of makes sense. But taking over Superman, you think of Superman, he's only vulnerable to magic and kryptonite. She's not kryptonite, and she's certainly not magic. I mean, she has powers. But she's able to put him under her hypnotic spell and kind of freeze his soul.
Yeah, well, I'm sure Jim Lee pointed to this during Hush, being like, see, Poison Ivy can take over Superman. Remember when Killer Frost did it in, DC Comics Presents 17? So, there was a little bit of precedent for that, but none of us have ever been so cold before. So who's to say what would happen?
There are lots of puns in this comic book.
And it is, as Cliff Clavin said, Dames is grief, Sammy.
Absolutely. So she takes over Superman, and she realizes, as she is, with the powers working the way that they do, she's going to freeze everyone and no one can serve her, and she wants to put men under her spell. So she needs to recreate the device that froze her to begin with so she can do something and take over the world and have every man, and I guess, worship her feet or something like that. And we see she's taken off with Superman. She's going to construct this thing. And Professor Stein sees it as she freezes the guards that are going to take him off to Bellevue. And we see Professor Stein doesn't want, or maybe he doesn't even know that he can, but he starts becoming the Firestorm breed. Ronnie Raymond does not want to be part of Firestorm. He just wants to be a teenager playing basketball.
Yeah, and because this is comics, we'll just overlook the fact that he blows the game and runs off, and nobody seems to go any farther than that with it. But he runs off and right just in time to be changed into Firestorm. So apparently Martin, his concern or whatever was enough to trigger it, even if he didn't realize it. So, and also at the time, there'd only been the 5-issue series of Firestorm. So there was, you could kind of, tinker with the formula, which is kind of what they did in this issue, which, brings Firestorm back for the first time since, I believe, issue 5 of his short-lived original series.
And he does not feel like much of a hero, and they have a kind of a discussion, and, Professor Stein is just kind of a big floating head that kind of talks to him and whatnot. And they realize they need to stop Killer Frost. She's clearly going to recreate this device so she can take over the world. And it's on the World Trade Center, Joe? How do they know this? They just knew it?
Well, you only had 17 pages at that time. Maybe if you had one of your fancy 22, 24 page comics, you could get into that. Yeah, but it's also important to keep in mind at this point, Gerry Conway's only in his mid-20s. So he's really, in terms of just tackling, some of these characters, a younger character like Firestorm, well, half a Firestorm, it's you see, it's a little hip. It's,
So they go to intervene, and they know Killer Frost has got Superman under her spell. And Firestorm decides that they're going to go toe-to-toe with Superman Breen. It doesn't go all that well. In fact, Professor Stein quickly realizes this is not going to be something that we could win. Even by changing molecules and making titanium plates and stuff, Superman's going to go right through it. We need to save Superman if we're going to stop Killer Frost. And he enacts a plan, but he doesn't tell Ronnie what it is because Ronnie is so unconfident in himself. Stein realizes he needs to figure this out on his own. I will give him the breadcrumbs to where he's going to get there and win the day, but he needs to do it so he can become a confident superhero.
And I think leads him into an active volcano or something like that. And
I thought he just drilled to the center of the earth.
Drill the center of the earth and is able to hold him off in time to where the heat thaws Superman out.
Although he does feel like he's about to die. He's like,
he's about to deliver the killing blow, but fortunately, that's just when enough thaws out to where he realizes what he's done and where he is.
Yeah.
And that's pretty much all she wrote, Joe. There's no way Killer Frost is going to be able to stop Firestorm and Superman. So they go, and she needs to go to Star Labs to get some equipment because she's got to do the job on her own. She's no longer got Superman to go and take care of her light work as far as getting tools and stuff. And next thing you know, Superman comes through, and she realizes he's not under my spell anymore. She tries to hit him with ice and everything. And we realize it's not a real Superman. Apparently Firestorm changed some molecules to make a fake Superman to distract her. It's diabolical.
This whole situation, this is a multi-page, we got about 5, 6, 7, lots of pages of action, all leading up to this. And I also, not just to point out José Luis Garciá-López, just incredible layouts here. Also props to Ben Oda, the letterer. Some really great lettering here. Killer Frost with the very icy dialogue and all of that. The way it's lettered is really fantastic and helps, the story and the character really stand out.
Definitely creates the ambiance of what's going on. There's been a ruse. It turned out to be a fake Superman so they could distract her. What were they doing, Breen? They were destroying the equipment and everything she was trying to set up on the top of the World Trade Center. Now all they need to do, I guess, is freeze her again, right? You got to put her under ice?
Yeah, well, one of the things with Superman stories in these days was when it came down to the actual battle, there's pretty much nobody he couldn't just one punch. So the drama in the stories was how they get to that point. Like the little impediments thrown in the way, like in Superman's case, being taken over and once he's thawed out. And then you got a few more pages to fill. So they destroy the machine she's building. But then the actual final confrontation is basically, one and done. And that's probably one of the reasons why they did the radical change after Crisis. But the fun of those stories is how do you get to that, what inevitably would be an anticlimactic finish. So it doesn't feel like it because a good writer could make what led to it so interesting, as in case here.
Yeah. The fun is him trying not to die while Superman needs to be thawed out and leading him into the center of the earth, while Ronnie Raymond realizes what he has to do to save Superman.
No, absolutely. Unlike the Silver Age, where all of it was, will Superman figure out this puzzle? Is he going to figure out why he's gathering items that spell out the word Superman? Things like that.
So we do get an epilogue at the end of this, and I think that's one of the reasons this comic book probably exists in DC Comics Presents number 17. We get a little heart-to-heart moment of Superman kind of mentoring young Ronnie Raymond as Firestorm. Ronnie Raymond still doesn't feel like he's got what it takes to be a superhero. He said, I gave it up for a year. And Superman's like, but when we needed you and people were in danger, you showed up and you saved the day because you're a hero. In fact, I would like to invite you to join the Justice League. And
we see that come to fruition in Justice League of America 179 with a striking Jim Starlin cover.
So we're seeing Firestorm elevated from just kind of a newer hero that had been introduced earlier to somebody that Superman respects and now is going to be a part of the biggest superhero team of all of DC Comics.
And it also led to a second series in 1982, also written by Gerry Conway for the first several years.
So this is a lot of fun, Joe. I'm glad you picked this one out. Love seeing Gerry Conway, José Luis Garciá-López, seeing some of these great comic book creators. And this is right on the precipice of real change for DC Comics, kind of turning into what they are going to be.
No, absolutely. I mean, Gerry becomes a real big player at DC from here on out, and has some really great runs that I think often get overlooked because the way a lot of people look at it is start DC after Crisis, or Crisis is when DC starts, but the reality is there is a lot of great stuff that DC was putting out prior to Crisis. Not saying that Crisis wasn't needed or that it didn't do a lot of good as well, but you are missing out if you completely ignore everything DC did before Crisis. And some of what you're missing is a lot of Gerry's some of arguably his best work on books like Firestorm, Justice League, and Batman.
And since this has been as much about celebrating José Luis Garciá-López's art as the Firestorm part of this, if you can track this down, this is where I got it from. It's a hardcover of The Adventures of Superman with his art, and it's a great read.
Absolutely. There's incredible stories in there, including the Superman Wonder Woman that we did as well. So that one book gets you two things that we covered on here. But you also get some great, standalone issues. There's a couple of multi-part stories in there. You get, team ups with other characters like Adam Strange. It's and the Flash. It's just great stuff.
Absolutely. So this one's a lot of fun. I think next week we're going to talk about the Fantastic Four. Going to go back and see, is Galactus going to get in a fist fight, Breen? Is that what's happening?
Galactus versus the Sphinx. Grab your popcorn because it's the only time you've ever seen him throw down physically.
Mm-hmm.
And the Watcher cheats. So come back for that.
I don't know about you, but I absolutely miss team-up books within Marvel and DC Comics. Obviously, there's been a lot of team-ups starring Superman. In fact, we already covered Superman and Shazam, like a really great team-up back in the day. Definitely check those one out. If you're looking for some more great Superman team-up comic books that Breen, Joe, and myself have covered before, you don't see it here, there's also a link in the video description.